All right. G'day, g'day. Welcome back to Collectivitis, podcast where we dissect the disease that is collectivism. My name's Pietro. This is Max. How you doing, Max?
Pretty good, Pietro. Good to be back on again. Little hiatus.
Yeah, I like that I ask you how you're doing every time at the start of an episode, even though we've been talking for 30 minutes before the episode. So I know how you're doing. But for the audience, yes, how are you doing? So speak to the audience, maybe. How are you doing, Max?
Hello, dear audience. I'm fantastic. I'm really good.
There were some fears for your health after you didn't appear for like 10 episodes or something like that.
Was
But good to
recharging
have
the
you back.
batteries for this episode, purely for this episode. That's what I was doing.
Yeah, so he's got a lot of hot takes in the bag. He's been
Oh
storing
yeah.
them up.
Oh yeah.
Well, we have a lot of hot takes to talk about. I This is one of those rare but very welcome weeks where I don't know what to start with. I don't know what to focus on because there's just so much going on. And I ended up going with the more Australian story that's been in the news this week that I think is really cool. Or one of the Australian stories, because again, even there's a bunch of stuff we could talk about. But um, so this relates to the Dan Andrews bike boy scandal of 2013. And I know we're reaching back a fair while to talk about something that happened in 2013, but the bike boy scandal was essentially Dan Andrews and his wife, when he was leader of the opposition, hit a 15-year-old cyclist, or were accused of hitting a 15-year-old cyclist. And the cyclist was hospitalized, and it all got kind of squashed and hidden, and there were conspiracy theories, but then the police did an investigation, and apparently the kid hit the car rather than the car hitting the kid, and it wasn't very clear. And it's come up a bunch of times over the years, but nothing's ever stuck over this issue, because at the end of the day, the police, when it was getting investigated, and it was investigated a few times while Dan Andrews was premier, the police always found that they were not at fault, or whatever it is. And I know that earlier this year, the bike boy, I forget his name, Ryan Newman, was suing his former law firm for not getting the right amount of money, considering how much he should have been able to get. And so Dan Andrews came up again, and all of this came up again. And it's all a little bit ancient history, except for the fact that just this week in Parliament, David Limbrick, our very own Libertarian MP, uh, using parliamentary privilege, revealed that he had a constituent who had shown him the 000 recording of when Dan Andrews had called into the to 000 to get help for this kid that had been hit. And it sounds pretty incriminating. I think I'm going to play it so we can listen to the recording itself. I'm sorry for anyone who doesn't want to hear Dan Andrews' voice, but I promise it's worth it this time round. Um, but yeah, before we do, had you heard about this story? Had you heard about these updates?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had and yeah, heard that Limbrick had used parliamentary privilege to speak about the call that he'd heard. Um, a couple of things, a couple of quick notes. I'm amazed that it's taken this long for anybody to hear the call if it was available somewhere. Secondly, the fact that it leaked like the next day after David brought this up in Parliament, the actual call leaked. Now I'm kind of intrigued to know who and how and this has gotten out so soon.
Well, the audio I'm reading here, the audio was released, I think, by 000 after the
Ah,
calls for it by Limbrick. I'm assuming that's what's happened
okay.
here. I could be wrong, but
So so
it doesn't
so
say that
why
it was
wasn't it?
leaked.
Yeah, okay. Well, why wasn't it released earlier then? It had no one, literally no one asked for it earlier.
Well, I think look, my read on all of this is that while Dan Andrews was premier, and especially while, like the whole COVID and post-COVID stuff was happening, where there was a lot of hatred for Dan Andrews, and even before that, like he was so obviously in bed with unions and in bed with, and like had influence over the police and the policing, and they covered his back. So while there was all of that going on and he was premier, there was someone, I mean, there was protection for him. They were running cover for him, and
Hmm.
they didn't want to release the call because it would maybe incriminate him, or it sounds like it might incriminate him. And again, we'll play it in a minute. Um, but now there's a few factors that have changed, and one of them obviously is that Dan Andrews is no longer premier. He also hasn't been premier for what, like a year, over a year
Hmm.
now. So whatever protection he had has significantly diminished because he's not greasing any palms anymore. It's someone else. It's Jacinta Allen, probably. Um, it's the fervor around it has dropped. There is a huge like spectacle around it. If Limbrick saying, "Hey, we've got this bombshell recording," there's the media is very interested. The media is going to be super keen to hear more about it. So there is like an incentive to releasing it now. And also, the police is no longer in a position where they can be picky about how little they care about their public image. Because
Mm.
if you've been following, Victoria Police recently, or not even just recently, the last few years, they're extremely desperate for people to sign up to be cops because no one wants to be a fucking
Yeah.
cop anymore.
Hmm.
So releasing it now, they almost have to. They can't deteriorate their public relationship all that much more, and they don't have that much of an incentive to keep it hidden anymore. So because of this, that's why I think it's come out at the moment. And I know after Limbrick had called for it to be public release, I remember I was having conversations with people, and they were like, "They're still not going to release it. No one's going to release it." And I thought, well, it is a significantly different time now. And I think that's why it's been released.
Yeah,
Does that answer your question?
it does, Pietro. I can better
Good.
better
Well,
play the
that's what I'm
audio.
here for. Yeah, like we've stalled the audio enough. People want to hear it from Dan Andrews' words himself. So enjoy.
Thanks, Telstra. Caller, where do you require the ambulance? What address, please?
On the corner of Ridley Street, Ridley,
Yes.
and Melbourne Road, Blair Gowrie.
Okay, so I'll just confirm your corner of Ridley Street and Melbourne Road, Blair Gowrie in Victoria. Is that also near Ridley Street and... Oh, sorry, that's all there. Yep, near the bike path.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and what's the problem there? Tell me exactly what's happened.
We've turned right into Ridley Street, and
Yep.
a kid's come flying through on the bike path,
Yep.
and we've hit him.
Okay.
He's on the ground.
All right, are you with him now?
We are with him now.
Is there just one person that needs attendance for the ambulance?
one person
How
needs
old is
help.
he?
He's a teenager.
Teenager?
I'd say he'd be, he's
Roughly?
not tall. He'd be 15.
15? Okay. Now, we do just have it. Was someone else on the phone to the ambulance, maybe?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
My wife might be, but
Oh, no worries. We've just had a job pop in for 10 Ridley Street, Blair Gowrie, for a similar thing, for a bike versus car. So I'd
Well, that's
say
the one.
it's the same job.
Well,
Now, so you're with him at the moment, obviously?
I'm just about 10 metres away trying to get a mobile phone signal.
No
So
worries. And
my
sorry,
wife
how
is
old
with
did
him
you
at
say
the
he
moment.
was?
I reckon he's 15.
15. And is he conscious?
He is conscious, but he's in a lot of pain.
Right. And is he breathing?
He is breathing, yes.
Okay. Just a couple of other questions. Are there any chemicals or other hazards involved? Is there anything
No.
on the road? No. And is anyone trapped in the
He is-
vehicle?
No.
No. Was anyone thrown from the vehicle? No.
No.
Does he appear to be completely awake?
All right, well, that's the crux of it. That's the interesting part. It does for another. I mean, it's just the recording of the call, so they do the logistics for the rest of it. But I think that's pretty wild to me. The fact that he says, like in his own words, there it was, the kid was on the bike path and we hit him. Like, yeah, he mentions he's come flying through, which just the slimy.
So that was the big thing that a lot of people were focusing on, was the fact that in the past he's said that, to defend themselves, he said that the bike has hit the car. And then the simple term in the call of "we've hit him." I don't think that's as damning as a lot of people are clinging onto it to be honest. Because I feel like anybody, I don't like defending Dan Andrews at all, but I feel like anybody in the heat of the moment isn't going to be that specific on their terms. Saying we've hit him or he've hit us, you just completely stating that there's been an accident between bike and car. The mention of a bike path, like, it sounds like it's a bike path crossing a road and they've turned into it. So, I mean, who has right of way? Would there have been lights? And it's 2013. I don't know if there would have been lights for pedestrian crossing there or bike path crossing.
Yeah, but see, I think, okay, let me argue with you. A couple of things there. So first of all, yes, okay, maybe it's not as damning because you can make that defense, sure. But I think the reason I think it is damning, if we look at the context of it, is first of all, who is on the phone? It's Dan Andrews, slimy political manipulator who has always been very careful and measured with his words in order to inflict damage or
Mm,
psychological damage
mm,
or to climb the disgusting ladder of the Labour Party's internal politics, machinery, whatever. He is very good at all of that. So um, I don't think that's a valid excuse, especially considering that he's being slimy in the call itself. If he's just
mm.
talking about the fact, if he is doing what you're saying, and he's just like, okay, there's been a crash, we need some help, whatever. Would he bring up the fact that the kids come flying around the corner? Like he's exculpating himself by saying
Yeah.
that this bike's going really fast, and yeah, we've hit him, but he came flying out of nowhere. Like
Yeah,
we
I,
had
I
no
do
chance
also
to.
feel like that would be anybody's natural defense is to protect themselves at a bare minimum standard,
That's what I'm saying.
and,
If
and
he is going
yeah,
to protect himself, if he is going to be slimy enough to say that, why would he say we've hit him
mm,
unless we've hit him, right? Like he would, if he's being slimy enough to defend himself by saying that the kids come flying out of
mm,
nowhere, he would have said he hit us, right?
yeah,
Like that. I don't think he is being slimy. He has, or
he
he is
has
already
hit,
covering his ass.
yeah,
Why would he say we've hit him?
yeah.
Is
I know
why I
he's got
think
the
it's
track
scary.
record of being slimy and gaslighter, but I think in every scenario you still got to treat every person an equal and give them the benefit of the doubt. Um, but so
No,
I'm
fuck,
so,
fuck that. That's fucking Dan Andrew. Okay, let's look at the broader picture here as well. Is why are we talking about this?
Trust me,
Like,
I hope he's guilty. I hope it was deliberate, and I hope he fucking gets what's coming for him. Trust me.
yeah,
But
this isn't.
just
I'm not talking about the letter of the law and the
yeah,
presumption of innocence. There are 100,000 things that Dan Andrew has done which are immoral and fucking illegal, probably if there was any justice in
mm,
the actual fucking justice system. Not least of which is the corruption with the unions and the
mm,
greasing the palms of all his friends, and even now, remaining completely blameless for all the shit that he's left behind, whether it be the vaccine mandates or the illegal kicking people out of their jobs or even the fucking Commonwealth Games, using this lie
mm,
about the Commonwealth Games to get himself re-elected, and then leaving just before the Commonwealth Games get cancelled because we never had the money to fucking bid for them anyway. Like all of
yeah,
this fucking corrupt, immoral shit that Dan Andrews has done without the fucking gaslighting. Like fuck
mm,
him. I don't care what sticks to him. I don't care if it's a fucking half made up chat. Like he's a piece of shit
yeah,
who deserves way more than what's coming to him. So that's the reason why anyone cares about this. No one really
mm,
cares about justice for a fucking cyclist for,
mm,
15, what is it, 12 years ago, for something that happened 12, 11 years ago. No one really cares about that to this extent. It's because it's Dan
yeah.
Andrews. It's because we need some fucking retribution for Dan Andrews.
It's,
And this.
this is true, and I agree with you on everything you've said. But my natural instinct is what I said, is to give every person the benefit of the doubt initially, just initially.
You're a much bigger man than I am, Max. That's your hot take. I promise hot takes from from Max because he hasn't been on in a while. His hot take is Dan Andrews did nothing wrong. Defend Dan Andrews. Hashtag defend Dan Andrews. You heard it here first from
Oh,
Max.
I stand with Dan.
I stand with Dan.
You know
Fucking
who's not
hell.
standing with Dan?
Yeah,
That
no, do you
that
know
poor
who's not?
cyclist.
Yeah, he's not fucking standing with Dan. He was in fucking hospital with
Oh,
fucking who knows. Um,
um,
well,
yeah,
he's
no, no,
alive at least.
yeah, no. He is a slimy piece of shit, and you know, trying to be a good person in life, but I hope he dies a slow death, Dan Andrews. I hope it's painful. I hope he gets hit by a car that his wife's driving.
Yeah, and I hope he dies a slow death, but I defend his right to a fair trial.
Hey,
Um,
okay, regardless of all that,
yeah,
there's the narrative that his wife was driving, which he reported, obviously to protect himself.
yeah.
Was he driving before we even get to the fact that there wasn't a breath test done on top of that, after he was leaving like a Labour Party function, which, political party functions are known for being booze fests.
Yeah.
Like, it's no secret. Um, is his wife allowed to drive a taxpayer funded car that's obviously in his name?
I get. I mean, I don't see why that shouldn't be. I think from what I'm
This
thinking
is what
about.
I'm trying to cling on to, Pietro.
Yeah, this is your problem with it.
No, I'm
Well,
just searching
what
for
I
something.
remember was there was some controversy about he was driving the car, but then as he made it seem like she, and they swapped, and then they left the
Mm.
scene or something before police could come, and then there was
Mm.
never an investigation, and there was never a breath test. They left and they came back. I remember there was a whole there's a whole series of questions around the chronology of what actually happened on the
Mm.
day that don't make sense. And I remember that was what a lot of the clinging to was prior to this moment,
Mm.
was that, the story doesn't make sense, the investigation is rushed, and they found no wrongdoing, surprise, surprise, because they wanted to find no wrongdoing.
Mm.
And that was why it never stuck. I think, yeah, there are still all those questions. I think they're all a little bit more credible now with the fact that he said we've hit him.
Yeah, okay.
Um,
So
but
what's next
anyway,
then? What will happen next? Will the investigation be reopened yet again?
well, I think that's what the hope is. I think the hope is that now this will lead to the invest. There is enough there to reopen
It,
the investigation and to
I
perhaps.
yeah.
I mean, I
Uh,
don't know what like at worst, what do they do? Like it's a car crash. It's a crash with a bike where
mm.
maybe he was intoxicated, but there's never going to be any way of
Yeah,
knowing.
yeah.
He'll get a
You
fine
can't
or
do an
something.
11-year retrospective breath test.
No, I think the win here is that first of all, it was the Libertarians and David Limbrick who
Mm.
brought this to the attention, which I think first of all positions. If anyone hadn't worked it out yet, which for some reason they still haven't, like half of Victoria hates Dan Andrews, but will vote for the Liberal Party that we're going to employ most of Dan Andrews.
Yeah.
Like, we'll keep the status quo going in a similar way to what Dan Andrews does anyway. You think the Liberal Party wouldn't have had lockdowns and
No,
fucking
of
mandates?
course. Of
Look at
course
New
they would
South
have.
Wales. In
Yeah.
fact, look at Basuto. He's way worse than what Perrottet was. So,
Hmm.
yes, like half of Victoria hates Dan Andrews, but hasn't worked out yet that the opposition to Dan Andrews is the Libertarian Party. I
Hmm.
think this is good in that sense that it positions, hey, the Libertarians are the ones who can still swing hits at Dan Andrews, who can still make him squirm and make him uncomfortable and bring something to the light, still care about the fact that this incredibly corrupt individual ruined the lives of, half of all Victorians or however many Victorians, and lockdowns, which are the exact reason why we now have this incredible cost of living. Like the Libertarians are still fighting this fight.
Yeah.
Um, and not just against Dan Andrews, obviously, but Dan Andrews is a very good
Hmm.
figurehead,
Well, he was a
like
figurehead.
a
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
masthead for
Exactly.
everything that's wrong with the Labour Party in the state.
Yeah.
So I think that's good. I think that's probably the positive. If some media comes out of this and is like,
Yeah.
"Hey, it's the Libertarians are still doing this stuff," I think
Hmm.
that's the greatest benefit, more than like the slap on the wrist that is inevitably going
Okay.
to go to
Okay.
Dan.
That's an angle I hadn't considered. So from that, yeah, 100%. It's great that it's being resurfaced and brought up. And I would be amazed though if previous investigations, the 000 call was never like I know Daniel Andrews had everybody in his pocket, but how can you run an investigation and not play the 000 call in the past? That blows my
Well,
mind.
and that's right. That reeks of corruption, right?
Yeah,
That is what
which is
also
no
reeks of
surprise
corruption.
because this man is the most corrupt politician we've ever seen in our state, probably Australia.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So yeah, I mean that's I think that's also why, like, it's if we can find this recording so easily, if it can be released so easily, however many years later, then why hasn't it come up before is
mm,
the question. Like, it's not
yeah,
been lost to time. In fact, it's been very easy to find in time. Clearly,
mm,
000 just had to go through their archives and like, what do you know? We had it
yeah,
all along. It was just never necessary. Yes, it reeks of the corruption that we know exists.
mm,
It's like we know all this corruption exists. We know like the unions are so in bed, and the CFMEU stuff. Like when it all comes out, none of it surprises us.
mm,
But it's interesting to know exactly how, like when we see an example of the corruption, we get an idea of how big the iceberg is underneath the tip. And this is another
yeah,
example of, this is the tip of the iceberg, but we get an idea of like just how, if they're so corrupt on just something petty like this, imagine the
mm,
amount of stuff that is going against the interests of the taxpayer and everyday Victorians because they have the reins of power and can grease palms and get themselves political favors and whatever to
yeah.
achieve their personal and their political goals at the expense of regular people who think that democracy is still a thing and think that it works and is an effective way of running anything. Anyway, that's the story. That's the Australian story we wanted to start with. As I said, we've got heaps to talk about. So let's move on before you defend Dan Andrews anymore. You,
Just
you
quickly before we
tra
move on, I wonder how it would feel to be Ryan and to be the one that was sick. So I'm pretty certain he is still living with issues. I remember there was like an interview a few years ago when like it got resurfaced again when Andrews was still in power. I'm pretty certain this kid's living with like some lifelong injuries from it. And yeah, I wonder how he feels sort of having people focus on Andrews
and
instead
not
of him.
him.
And like you said though, if it wasn't for Daniel Andrews, no one would give a fuck about this kid that's been hit. No one would know about it. But still, geez, there must be a lot of pressure, having all this stuff resurface and knowing that you were the one that got hit. You're just sitting there going, well, hopefully for his sake, he hates Dan, which I'm pretty certain he does, and he wants to see Dan taken down as much as anybody else.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, I think I think for him, like every time it comes up, it's sort of it helps his case. So he's probably pleased with this stuff
Yeah.
resurfacing. And I can't imagine he has a very high opinion of Dan Andrews, obviously.
Mm.
I can just imagine though, like if they do an interview, and I'm not saying he's not living with ongoing injuries or whatever, but if I were him and I was doing an interview and talking about this years later, yeah, I'd sit in a wheelchair and I'd like
Yeah.
put a bandage around my head and I'd talk with a lisp and I'd like try and make my eye droopy or something. Like, yeah, I'd ham it up to make it look like I was still suffering. I don't know. I'm not saying that's what he's done, but I would in
And
that
then
in
you'd
that position.
and then you'd say that you're like living with mental health issues and you wanted to check yourself into this facility or you were using like this agency or whatever, and then all of a sudden Dan Andrews has been appointed chairman of this youth mental health agency, and
Yeah.
then you just get PTSD and your life gets even worse.
Yeah, sucks. Anyway, reach out if you want to talk on the podcast, Ryan. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about
100%.
it.
Get
That'd
him
be a
on.
fun one to get.
Get him on.
Um,
I'm sorry, Ryan, for making a joke about you not being able to stand.
So anyway, moving on. Let's get on to the next topic because I don't know if anyone's noticed or not noticed or whatever, but there is a US election about to happen on Wednesday here in Australia, but on Tuesday,
Oh boy.
November 5th in the US, and
It is going to be a crazy week or two following the election, regardless of what happens.
yeah.
It is like fucking brace yourselves, people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's already crazy. You can see like they're just in overdrive at the moment. Like
Hmm.
anything Trump or anyone near Trump says is headline news,
Hmm.
regardless. Like, what was the recent one? The Tony Hinchcliffe that made a
Yeah,
joke
the
about
comedian.
Puerto Ricans, and
Mm.
suddenly like it's everywhere. Like
Hmm.
everywhere is this joke that trying to make out that Trump is a racist and hates Puerto Ricans. It's not even Trump anymore that they need.
Yeah.
They just need anyone in the circle. So it's they're in an absolute tornado of the last leg. It's
Well,
interesting. There was
apparently the Trump campaign group came out trying to backpedal after Tony Hinchcliffe said that, trying to be like, no, no, it's okay. We do like Puerto Ricans. So are they worrying now?
Well, I think they're just running cover because they're like it's so the margins on this election seem to be so slim that it's anything you can like if you get accused of being racist about Puerto Ricans, even though most
Mm.
99% of people know that you're not, you still say it just in case 1% extra votes.
Yeah.
Like at this
You
at this
you say
point,
the
you
margins are
scrape
so
for
slim.
everything.
You say the margins are so slim. It's so hard to get a read on this election because in so many facets, Trump should be ahead by a country mile. But then, I mean, then you have to factor in the rigging, the obvious rigging and attempts to rig. And then you go, okay, what if it is a bit closer? And then you factor in a little bit of rigging, that takes off a few points. And it is just so hard to get a gauge on what's going to happen. And, like when Hillary lost to Trump in 2016, she lost the unlosable election.
Hmm.
And I just think the ramifications of Trump losing the unlosable election right now, like, would
Well,
also be
I don't
crazy.
think I don't think anyone's saying this is an unlosable election for Trump. I think most of everyone realizes
But it
like the polling
should
is
be.
is razor tight.
It
Well, that's
should
what
be
but it's okay.
based on his opposition.
Yes. So this election, I think that's what's important about this, right? Is that this election, it's not unlosable because he's got such a lead. That's what they were
Mm,
saying with the Hillary one. Like it's unlosable because she has such an advantage. She's a
mm,
politician, he's a reality star, he's a
mm,
buffoon, she's got all the media on her side. He doesn't have those advantages. Like, yeah, he's been the president before, but he's also got all of the establishment dead against him, all of the media dead against him. Like it's not unlosable for him. The point is, the only reason he should be
The point
ahead
is
by
he's
more.
coming in with a handicap.
What we're saying is he should be ahead by more because he's done so well compared to what she's done, right? It's not unlosable. It's not that like he's throwing it because he's fucked it up the way that Hillary fucked it up. What we're looking at is he's not winning because and she is so bad. Like she is effectively useless. Like she can't give a speech. She has no policies. She's not running on what she used to run on at the last presidential election when she lost to Biden. She's not running on the last 4 years of Biden's presidency because they've been awful. She is essentially just a cutout figure of a person that the establishment is propping up as who's going to lead when really they're going to lead, right? So the problem is that Trump should be winning by so much more because he's done so well against her. And the fact that he's not shows that potentially, like, even when someone is so bad against someone who is at campaigning so much better, the establishment might still be able to win. And if Kamala Harris wins this, I think that shows definitively that the establishment just has more power and more numbers to be able to beat even someone, like even when there's such a disparity between the candidates themselves. And that's what's scary because, right, this Kamala Harris campaign wins. And do you think they're going to be more or less strenuous with how many third world immigrants they let through the border that are going to vote Democrat because of welfare programs? They're going to be less stringent. And therefore, and then they're going to flood those into the states that they need that are close. And then all of a sudden, the 5 or 6 swing states that currently decide every election or every recent election
are going to become blue states year in, year out.
Are just going to become blue states. And even though it might be, it might still be 60% of the country is a Democrat and 40% is Republican, the Republicans will never win anything ever again. And eventually, the Democratic state
I think that's a lot of what like Trump's been focusing on, like with the, I'm sure you listened to it, but like, the episode with Rogan, did you listen to the whole podcast?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, so there was, Trump focusing on it a bit, saying like if he loses, he's like his own words were like this country is done, and that's probably what he's referring to. That there will not be, like, we all know democracy's dead, but there will be no revival for it if what you just said comes to fruition.
Yeah, yes. I think that's what the country's probably done even if Trump wins, right? They've got this debt crisis, which he and his campaign, and I know there's a lot of things to like about his campaign, but they're kind of micro parts of it to like. The macro of it is he still has no intention of cutting like the big ticket items that cause the deficit, like the military industrial complex, the pharmaceutical complex, the welfare state, all of that stuff he can't touch and won't touch. Or could touch, I guess, but won't touch. And so this debt crisis is still it's probably going to come to a head if Trump wins, during his presidency. In the next term, it's probably going to come to a head. So whoever's in there is going to look like the biggest loser of all time. But Trump's point, so the country's probably gone to shit anyway, but Trump's point is if we can't win this against this bad an opponent, then the democratic system that we have, like the electoral votes and all of that, is going to forever favor the Democrats.
Yeah,
you can't flip it further than this. She is so nothing compared to him that they've manipulated the system. They've played the game well enough that the Democrats will always win. I think that's more. I don't know if that's his point, but I think that's how I see it more. He might be sensationalizing the fact that she's going to ruin the country. The country's going to go to hell.
And that's part of his campaigning too, of course, sensationalizing that.
Yes, and that's when I say he's good. I like the things I like around him, and I think we've talked about this before on the podcast. The fact that he's got people around him whose big issues are certain things that are good for libertarians, such as Tulsi Gabbard and RFK both want to end the foreign war, especially the one in Ukraine, which is the biggest risk of our decimation that we possibly have is nuclear war with Russia, which the Democrats and the neocons in the Democratic establishment are hell-bent on pushing us towards. So that's good, right? That's good about the Trump campaign. It's not necessarily Trump's idea. He's been kind of flip-flopping on it, but now that he's got RFK and Tulsi, he has to push for it because
Mm.
he co-opted them into his campaign. That's good. He's said that he's going to release Ross Ulbright, the guy who's been in prison for the Silk Road, who
Mhm.
is close to the hearts of many libertarians. That's good. The recent one that we were going to talk about is that Elon Musk just yesterday tweeted that he would like to engage Ron Paul into his Department of Government efficiency that he wants to create, and he tweeted that he wants Ron Paul to be a part of it. And Ron Paul tweeted back saying, "I'd be happy to talk with you about it, Elon." So Elon co-opting Ron Paul into the Trump the Trump
Mm.
circle somehow is obviously good. This is the closest Ron Paul or a really good libertarian will ever have been to the reins of power. That's
Mhm.
awesome, right? These are great things. Of course, none of them seem to be that much about Trump himself. As I said, they're all about the stuff around him.
I
But
do kind of feel, to be honest, like that Trump is building a team that will hold the country in good stead for once his term is done. Because obviously, this, if he gets elected, this is his last term. And that's one thing I do commend him for. Obviously, we like him as an opposition to Kamala because, it's a much, much better option. But we have to be careful with our support for him because, he's not the savior. Like, he's just,
yeah,
um, he's just another big government fool. But the fact he's building a team which is leaning libertarian or, things
has
that we think would
aspects of it.
actually
Yeah,
better our society in terms of like, anti-establishment. I feel like he knows what he's doing. I feel like he is. Well, he sort of ran off that anti-establishment motive earlier on, and then got in power and was, oh, hang on, I'm just another person in the government who has control and power, and I'm not actually going to do these things I promised. But yeah, I just feel like deep down, maybe he truly is anti-establishment, and that's the team he's building.
he's for sure surrounding himself with better people this time. That's
Mm.
that's the big difference. Is that
Well, I
last
actually
time he
think
ran on drain the
he's
swamp.
admitted in the past that he didn't have the right people around him.
He admits it, but he does like he's
Yeah,
still even on Rogan. He was like, "Yeah, I made some mistakes, but still, I made some of the best appointments ever." And I was like, "Nah,
yeah.
not really." And
That's him. He's a bit of an egomaniac. Like if he's ever going to admit he's done something wrong, he'll follow it up by saying the 10 greatest things he's ever done.
yeah. So that's, but he is certainly surrounding himself with better people now, and yeah, the movement that he might perpetuate, because I mean, someone has to replace Trump as this America first, as you said, he can't run
Mm,
again. And even if the Democrats win and we think it's hopeless forever,
mm,
there is still a huge America first movement that
mm.
someone has to inherit. And
Yeah,
hopefully it is someone like, I really like Vivek
yeah.
Ramaswamy, who he's still has as part of his inner circle, and he's going to involve him
Hmm.
somehow. And you've
Hmm.
got, RFK, who, yes, okay, is not great on the Israel Gaza thing, but he's pretty good on everything else. And
Yeah.
he's not great on like some free market stuff, but he's pretty good on the foreign wars and the
Hmm.
pharmaceutical state and the health stuff. So there's some hope
Mm.
that whoever takes on. My point, as I said earlier, is that regardless, no one's tackling unless Ron Paul gets in there and starts to and bends someone ear
Mm.
towards actually tackling the Federal Reserve and the debt and the crisis that is about to come and
Yeah.
convinces someone. They're still not touching on that, and so the
Mm.
Trump the Trump presidency, the hypothetical Trump presidency, will still be one of pain. I think at some point it's gonna hit. I mean, if Kamala's in charge, the same thing's going to hit, except maybe a little bit sooner, and maybe with more of a chance of World War III, and maybe with a more odious person at the front, and maybe with the admission that the establishment will forever control America. That's
Yeah.
the reason Kamala is worse.
Mm.
But anyway, that's the
Yeah. Anyway, I know we sort of started this talking about Elon and Ron Paul, but just to mention something from the Rogan podcast
Mm,
again, I don't want to detract too much, from your point that you were trying to make, but one thing I found really interesting was the admission when he was talking about RFK being like the head of the Department of Health or whatever it is. Was Rogan asked him, he goes, like, did you have any pushback on that? And
mm,
Trump admitted, he goes, yeah, there was pushback. And then he said something like, it's an understatement to say there was pushback on RFK because obviously he was against the vaccine mandates and the vaccine in general. He is against seed oils and, all these
Mm.
dangerous chemicals being used in our farming, things that are affecting us. And then Rogan goes, "Who's the pushback from?" And Trump admitted Big Pharma. And I just thought that was such an interesting admission. Like, obviously it's no secret, but to publicly say that, it just goes to show that he still isn't in charge. The
Yeah, yeah.
establishment is in
Well,
charge.
he did
But
he
to hear him admit that like that, and I feel like he was very quiet when he said that. He wasn't making a big point of it. He just sort of like slipped it in there. I found that fascinating.
yeah, and
What are your thoughts?
that's the whole point of Trump, right? Is that that was the reason that people believed in him the first time around was it was he is so self-assured and hard-headed that he might go against someone like Big Pharma. He
Mm,
might go against someone like the military-industrial complex. And he kind of didn't. And I mean, yes, the signals this time are more positive. The fact that yes, he got pushback for getting RFK on board, but he still got RFK on board. So he is
mm,
willing to go against those things.
yeah.
I mean, someone tried to assassinate him twice.
Hmm.
And both times there were very suspicious, things surrounding it, especially, the first time the lapses in security around
Yeah.
him. He's as he's admitted, it's a dangerous job, and the more he goes against the nexus of power, the more dangerous it gets for him.
Mm,
Um, and I guess he is proving that this time around he is willing and a little bit more able, possibly because he's listening to the right people, to go against
mm,
the nexus of power, or some of the
yeah.
nexus of power. Obviously, there's lots more.
And I suppose that
Um,
brings us back to your original point, which was having the right people around him. Ron Paul, hopefully.
well, yeah, Ron Paul, who's I mean, he
Your
could have
hero.
involved him when he was a bit younger.
Yeah,
He's
I
in
know
his
he's getting on a
90s now,
bit.
but
Is
poor
he in
Ron
his
Paul is going to have
90s?
to.
Is
I
he
think
that?
so.
Fuck.
Let me have a
I knew he
look.
was getting on, but let me Google. Or are you Googling it?
Yeah, I mean he's 89. Sorry, he's not in his 90s, but
No,
just.
he's so far away.
I mean he's what does that make him like? What's Biden? Is Biden 81? So he's 8 years older than Biden
A
and like
lot more
cognitively
cognitive.
like 20,000 times more there. He hasn't lost a bit, but
Yeah.
like, an 89-year-old man to have to swoop in and rescue the country at that age. He could have done it
Yeah.
when he was a bit younger. He
Mm.
could have brought him in when he was a bit younger. But anyway,
But there is, I know Biden has like lost all cognitive ability, and there's a big movement for younger politicians to come in because people are saying, these old people they're not capable. But experience, living through different times in life, it is super important to have these people who have lived through different stages, lived through different economic crises and all that to be there and to build off that experience. A lot of these young people, like young politicians are great, but if you had nothing but young politicians in power, which is what the left want, they get rid of all the old people. There would be nothing substantial or sustainable in any policies.
yeah, nothing shouts life experience like having shat yourself at the Vatican. That's for sure. We want those kind of experiences in the hearts and minds rattling somewhere around it. But yeah, I take your point. I know the Greens here want to elect 18 to 21-year-olds
Yeah.
because that's their demographic.
Hmm.
Yes, that's absurd and stupid. I don't know. I think at that there's an age where I mean, obviously, for a career politician like Joe Biden, he never cared about the country and lined his pockets a hundred
Mm.
thousand times, and not just him, but his fucking
His
drug
sons,
drug
yeah.
addict son and stuff like that. But there is a point to, at the age of 80, 90, whatever, how invested are you in the future of the country
Mm.
when you're about to leave the world? I mean, yeah, you have kids and grandkids, but I mean, someone who has to live in it themselves for the next 30, 40, 50 years might have more of a long-term view of prosperity rather than a very short-term sugar hit to try and be set the country straight while you're still around. I think there's something to that, but not that I think. I mean, Ron Paul's entire career was about saying the unpopular thing that is true. So I don't think the fact that Ron Paul is older matters as much as someone like a career politician like Biden or something.
Mm.
Anyway, that's more or less the crux of what we wanted to talk about today. The last thing I just wanted to mention was just how tight the everything's looking, including the betting odds. So like the betting odds I was just looking at, early today. I'll show.
Yeah, I've been following the betting odds the last week, and it was pretty like solid in favor for Trump. But this is like Australian. This is like sports, but I'm looking at because quite often, like you really can trust the bookies because they are the experts at knowing which way something's going to fall because they've got fucking a million analysts and that's how
Well,
they make their money.
it's because the betting odds follow they follow who has put bets
Mm.
on things. Like the more people bet on Trump, then therefore the higher his odds will go.
Yeah, but that's
So
also
it's
coupled
all
with
based on an
actual analysis too.
yeah, but
Right now,
these swings are due to not due to analysts, they're due to
mm,
people. Like for example here, like you can see that on October 29th, Trump was at 63.9, which is the highest he's been
yeah,
since Kamala's been around. So Kamala clearly some gamblers have gone, gamblers, some speculators have gone in and seen that this is a really good time to buy Kamala Harris considering
mm,
how close it's going to be because you get a good price on
yeah, you're
her.
gonna get the best
And
price. Yeah,
we've seen a massive drop in the last. It's not like the last 3 days have been analysts looking at it and saying, "Oh, actually, we were wrong about how much in favor it is to Trump." It's the fact that people are trying to buy Kamala at a good price, and we'll see if this
yeah,
continues. Generally, the trend is
and it could be factors like that Puerto Rico joke, things like that too. That was
yes, yeah,
and even if that was minor, the way the media blew that up to become major is like raising awareness of it and making people question Trump and anybody. The thing is though, like how many people the issue right now isn't people sitting on the fence. As the last week of campaigning from both sides, you haven't seen them campaigning to win votes. It's been to tell people to actually go out and vote. And that's what happens every US election at this stage, because this is the thing with like non-compulsory voting, um, is that, you can support someone, but just not go out and vote and any fucking thing can happen. So that's
yeah,
the really interesting thing is that, you know, who right now is convincing their demographic to go out and vote better.
yeah, yes. And I mean, yeah, I think. I don't know. I don't know that there's much that can happen between now and the election that will sway people. I think it's almost locked in now. It's too close. Like no big story, no big bombshell, and I could eat
Yeah,
my words, tomorrow or something. But I think it's going to
this
be
divide, not there's not a substantial amount of people sitting on the fence who, oh, I don't know who I prefer.
yeah,
Everybody
yeah,
knows who
yeah,
they prefer. Everybody is so strong one side or the other. The like number of votes, there's 350 million people in America. There's probably 500,000 people who are actually like, oh, I don't know who I like better.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's right, and it's probably well, that's the thing. It's all in those swing states where 5 states will decide, or however many they are, five,
Mm,
7, will decide the outcome of the election, and the rest of the country's votes
mm.
do nothing.
What are your thoughts for the week or two following the election? Obviously, whichever way it goes, it will likely be contested. It'll go to court. It's going to be messy.
Well,
I
if
worry if Kamala wins, the reaction from the the right.
Kamala wins, civil war. We need a civil war. Have a civil war.
Yeah,
Civil war. I mean, if I was an American, I'd think differently because
yeah.
it's not
You don't want that
pleasant.
happening in your
But
backyard. Yeah.
if Kamala wins, I just think like there needs to be a huge
Hmm.
swath of people who don't believe that anything is real, who lose faith in democracy, lose
Yeah.
faith in the
Hmm.
establishment, and if they're willing to go to that extent and have a have a civil war.
Yeah.
Um,
So be it. We'll watch from afar.
then maybe that's the only way to save America because America is captured and America is it's not the land of the free, which
Mm,
we know it's not, but the political avenue might be done.
yeah. And
I say that a little
if
tongue in
Trump
cheek. I don't know if I
wins,
actually want a civil
yeah.
war, but I mean I don't mind the idea that there's
Mm,
significant unrest if
yeah.
Kamala wins.
Thing is though, yeah, and if Trump wins and comfortably more so, I don't think there's going to be very much unrest. If it's comfortable victory for Trump, I don't think there'll be much unrest. It'll just be a bunch of sooks saying, I'm moving to Canada again. And that's it. And everyone will go, okay, go on. We don't care. Bye bye.
And hopefully this time they fucking do it. And it looks like
Yeah.
isn't what's his name up in Canada? Trudeau. Doesn't it look like he's gonna lose the next one anyway? So
Does it? I haven't really followed that very much since the last election that he called at a ridiculously early.
Yeah.
I suppose it makes sense. He called it ridiculously early because he knew that he was sliding and would lose if it was pushed back a month or two.
I
So
think
so it makes sense.
his Pierre Poilievre or whatever the conservative leader. From what I don't follow Canade, but I think he's gaining on Trudeau and possibly is more popular than him at the moment.
Okay.
Anyway, we don't need to talk about Canada as well. Who gives a fuck about Canada right now?
Right
We can
now.
talk about Canada in the future.
Well, maybe that's how Trudeau gets back in power, is when these people actually leave America, when they suck about Trump.
Yeah,
they go to Canada, and then Canada has border problems and immigration problems with Americans.
Yeah, has to close the border.
Yeah.
All
Builds
right.
a
Well,
wall.
I think that's a South Park skit. I think
Yeah,
I think
actually,
they've
you're
done
right.
that. Yeah.
Damn it, South Park have done everything.
Well, that's true. All right, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you all for tuning in and listening. We will, if you don't already, you can follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, and X, and Apple Podcasts as of recently as well. Thanks for listening. We will catch you next time.
Adios.